My parents manipulated me for money, favored my sister, and excluded my son from Christmas while inviting other kids. I never imagined I'd be a widow at 34, but here I am, Dakota, sitting at my kitchen table at 7 a.m., trying to get my 7-year-old son ready for school while holding back tears. It's been 8 months since Mark died in an accident on the building site, but it feels like yesterday. The initial months following Mark's death were a flurry of paperwork, sorrow, and sleepless nights. I honestly don't know how I would have gotten through without Sarah and Jim, my in-laws. They've been total angels, getting Tommy up from school every day so I can concentrate on work. I stop by their house afterward to get him, and every time, they want to give me money. Sarah, really, I can't take this, I told her last week, holding back the envelope she attempted to sneak into my purse. Dakota, sweetie, we want to help, she insisted, her gentle gaze finding mine. We know the insurance company paid well, but your family, let us do this. She's correct about the insurance. Following Mark's death, the firm paid out $300,000. With that and my job as a marketing manager, we're doing well financially. But it isn't about money for Sarah and Jim. It's about the love they offer us every day. If only my parents were half as supportive. Mom and Dad have always made it plain that my older sister, Rachel, was their favorite child, and now they prefer her children over Tommy. Last weekend was typical. Tommy was eager to see his grandparents, but Mom was already fussing about his questions after only 20 minutes. Why does the clock make that sound? Tommy inquired, pointing to their antique grandfather clock. How does it work inside? Dakota, can't you control him? Mom groaned and rolled her eyes. He's always asking questions about everything. Rachel's kids never give us this much trouble. Dad nodded in agreement and reached for his laptop. Here, Tommy, why don't you play some games instead? Look, I downloaded some new ones. Tommy, however, did not want to play games. He wanted to communicate, learn, and connect. Meanwhile, Rachel's 3 children sat in the corner, engrossed on their phones, barely noticing anyone's presence. My parents portrayed this as the perfect behavior. I've learned to bite my tongue. Growing up as the less favored child, I became accustomed to these comparisons long ago. Now, I just shake my head and remain mute when people compliment Rachel's parenting while condemning mine. At the very least, they helped with Tommy on occasion, such as watching him when I had late meetings or picking him up if both Sarah and Jim were busy. It was intended to be just another Tuesday dinner at my parents' home. The warning signs were present from the time I went in. Mom had prepared my favorite lasagna, which she generally only cooks when she wants something. Dad was particularly chatty, inquiring about work, Tommy, and pretty much everything. They were building towards something. I simply didn't know what. So, Dakota, Mom remarked gently as she cut her lasagna into beautiful squares. We've been meaning to ask you something. I took a sip of water to brace myself. How much was Mark's life insurance payout? The question struck me like a slap in the face. I nearly choked on my water, taken aback by such a forthright question about something so intimate. Perhaps it was the shock, or perhaps I was simply tired of hiding secrets from my parents. But I responded truthfully. About $300,000, I replied gently. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's head shot up so swiftly that I felt he could injure himself. They looked at me as if I had just declared I had won the jackpot. Well, Mom began, carefully setting down her fork. What are you planning to do with all that money? I could feel their expectations weighing down on me. I've invested it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's for Tommy's future, his college education, maybe to help him buy an apartment when he's older. Mark and I always talked about. But that's years away, Dad said, waving his hand dismissively. You should be thinking about the present, Dakota. About yourself and your family. The way he stated family made it apparent he wasn't referring to Tommy. I recognized that tone. It was the same one they used to aid Rachel with her down payment for her house or to fund her extravagant wedding. You could do so much with that money now, Mom added, leaning forward eagerly. You could help your family, people who need it today, not save it all for some distant future that might not even. I'm not discussing my money anymore. I interrupted her, my voice harder than I wanted. The hush that followed was oppressive. They both sat back, Dad's expression clouded with displeasure, something I had seen so many times growing up. Mom squeezed her lips together in a thin line that always indicated difficulty. The rest of the dinner was spent in tight quiet, interrupted only by the scrape of forks against plates. I assumed that would be the end of it. Knowing my parents, I anticipated them giving me the silent treatment for at least a month. It was what they always did when I failed to meet their expectations. But to my astonishment, Mom called only a week later. "We're having a family dinner on Sunday," she said, her voice as friendly as if nothing had happened. "Rachel and the kids will be there too. You have to come, sweetie." Something in her tone made me apprehensive, but I consented. When I arrived on Sunday, Rachel was already there with her 3 children, all of whom were hooked to their phones as usual. As we sat down to lunch, she began ranting about rising costs, accumulating bills, and how difficult it was to make ends meet these days. "Everything is just so expensive now," she complained, passing the potatoes. "Your father and I barely have enough for a normal life anymore," Mom explained, drying her eyes with a handkerchief as she discussed rising grocery prices and electricity bills. Rachel cleared her throat and sat straighter. "I've been thinking," she said, staring around the table with the same self-righteous attitude she'd had since we were children. "Dakota and I should help Mom and Dad financially. I'll send them $500 every month. I wish I could do more, but you know how it is. Jack's the only one working, and with 3 kids." She paused, allowing that to sink in before turning to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "But you, Dakota, you should send them $1,000 monthly." "Excuse me." I nearly choked on my water. "Well, it makes sense," Rachel continued. "You earn really well at your job, and you only have 1 child to support. Plus, with your situation, you have other income now." Rachel's careful avoidance of mentioning Mark's death made my blood boil. I wanted to shout that I was a widow, that I no longer had my husband's income to rely on, and that the other income she was referring to was intended for my son's future. But Mom was already clapping her hands with joy, and Dad was beaming like it was Christmas morning. "Oh, girls," Mom said, "you don't know what this means to us." I sat there, divided between fury and amazement, witnessing my family's hopeful expressions. The words of refusal died in my throat. I'd spent my entire life trying to gain their approval, and now they were putting a price on it. "Fine," I heard myself saying. "I'll do it." The first transfer was the most painful. $1,000 was gone with a few clicks. I convinced myself it was worthwhile if it meant more family support for Tommy. But that fantasy quickly dissipated. "Mom, could you pick Tommy up from school today? Sarah has a doctor's appointment, and I have a late meeting." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Mom's voice cracked over the phone. "I've got such a headache today. You know how my migraines get." This became a pattern. There was always an explanation for why she couldn't assist with Tommy. Mom was too busy. She was exhausted. She had errands to run. Her back was acting up. Meanwhile, the $1,000 was automatically deducted from my account each month. One particularly unpleasant Thursday, after Mom claimed she couldn't watch Tommy because she might be sick, I contacted Sarah in desperation. "Of course, we'll pick him up," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Jim's already heading to the school. He loves their little chats on the drive home. Tommy's been telling him all about their science project." I hung up the phone and sat at my desk, trying to hold back tears. $1,000 per month got me nothing but excuses from my own mother, whereas my mother-in-law dropped everything to help without asking for a dime. December snuck up on me that year. We had always celebrated Christmas at my parents' house. It was a family tradition. Everyone came there to exchange gifts, share meals, and make memories. The call came exactly 1 week before Christmas. I was assisting Tommy with his homework when my phone lit up with Mom's number. "Dakota, honey," she began, using that syrupy sweet tone that always signaled terrible news. "About Christmas Eve, we've decided to do something different this year. We're having an adults-only party. No children allowed." The pencil I was holding broke in my hand. "What?" "It's just that we want to do something more sophisticated this year," Mom explained, as if she were talking about something as insignificant as changing dinner plans. "You know, wine, adult conversation. But it's Christmas." I objected, stepping back so Tommy couldn't hear. "What am I supposed to do with Tommy?" "Oh, that's easy," she said, her voice light and dismissive. "You can leave him with Sarah and Jim. They'd love to have him, I'm sure. You'll come by around 7. After hanging up, I gazed at Tommy, who was still working on his arithmetic problems, blissfully unaware that his grandmother had just canceled his Christmas invitation. My heart wrenched as I watched him concentrate on his multiplication tables, his tongue hanging out just like Mark's did. I spent the following week debating what to do. The idea of celebrating without Tommy felt terrible, but canceling the family Christmas together seemed too dramatic. Finally, I came up with a solution. I'd leave Tommy with Sarah and Jim for a few hours, go to my parents' place to exchange gifts and greetings, and then return to properly celebrate with my in-laws and son. On Christmas Eve, I arrived at my parents' house alone, carrying a bag of nicely wrapped presents. The driveway was packed with cars, more than typical for our family gatherings. Walking up to the front door, I could hear laughter and Christmas music filling the cold December air. When I opened the door, the world appeared to tilt sideways. The house was crowded with relatives, aunts, uncles, and cousins. But that wasn't what stopped me in my tracks. Rachel's 3 children ran through the living room wearing paper crowns. Near the Christmas tree, I noticed my cousin Linda's children eating cookies. More children emerged in my line of sight. My cousin Mark's twins and my cousin Susan's teenager. The room suddenly felt too hot and too cramped as the truth of the situation dawned on me. I stood in the doorway, the present bag hanging limply from my palm. This was not an adults-only party at all. My son was the only one who was not invited to the celebration. I stood paralyzed, my mind straining to comprehend the scene in front of me. My aunt was the first to see me. "Dakota, sweetheart," she exclaimed, rushing over to hug me. She then looked around expectantly. "Where's little Tommy? Don't tell me he's sick on Christmas Eve." Before I could respond, my cousin Peter interjected. "Yeah, where's our favorite little scientist? Jake's been wanting to show him his new chemistry set." More relatives gathered around, all asking the same question. Where was Tommy? Why had I arrived alone? Each inquiry felt like a knife being twisted in my gut. I couldn't form words. I couldn't describe what I didn't comprehend. Through the bustle, I noticed my mother in the kitchen, placing cookies on a Christmas-themed tray as if everything were normal, as if she hadn't just omitted her sole grandson from a family event. "Excuse me," I managed to mutter, moving past my concerned family members. My feet took me to the kitchen on autopilot, rage rising with each stride. "Mom," I asked, my voice low and controlled, "can we talk privately?" Something in my tone prompted her to put down the platter. I guided her into the corridor, away from inquisitive eyes and ears. "You told me this was an adults-only party," I stated, trying to keep my voice steady. "You specifically told me not to bring Tommy. So why are Rachel's kids here? Why are all the cousins' children here?" Mom fixed her Christmas sweater, avoiding my gaze. "Well, that's different." "Different how?" "Those children," she remarked, nodding vaguely toward the living room, "know how to behave at formal gatherings. They're well-mannered." I looked at her in bewilderment. "Well-mannered? Tommy is one of the most polite children I know. His teachers praise his behavior constantly. Sarah and Jim always say." "Oh, Sarah and Jim," Mom said, rolling her eyes. "They spoil him, encourage all those endless questions. The other children, they deserve to be here more. They know their place." As if on cue, a disturbance broke out in the dining area. Rachel's youngest kid, Kevin, had taken a bunch of deviled eggs and was hurling them at his sister. The eggs flew across the room, splattering on Emily's beautiful Christmas dress as she screamed. I turned back to my mother, lifting an eyebrow. "Yes, I can clearly see their superior manners on display." Mom's expression tightened. That's just children being children. But when Tommy asks questions about how things work, that's unacceptable behavior. "Don't be so dramatic, Dakota. He's fine with Sarah and Jim." "I'm leaving," I said, turning toward the door. "I'm going back to my son." Mom shrugged and examined her manicure. "Fine, leave if you want to make a scene. But put your gifts under the tree first. We're opening them after dinner." Something snapped within me. I stood there, looking at my mother's dismissive shrug. Before I could think twice, I walked into the center of the living room. I cleared my throat loudly, cutting through the festive music and conversation. Heads turned, conversations ended mid-sentence, and all eyes were on me. "Several of you have asked why I came alone tonight," I said, my voice stronger than I had anticipated. "Why isn't Tommy here celebrating Christmas with his family?" Rachel tried to approach me, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish." I drew a breath and continued. "I'm here alone because a week ago, Mom called and told me this was an adults-only party. I was specifically told not to bring Tommy." My aunt's voice broke through the hush. "But all the children are here. We had no idea there was a ban on children," Uncle Steve explained, puzzled. Mom walked forward, her cheeks heated. "Dakota, this isn't the time." "Oh, I think this is exactly the time," I said, my voice raising slightly. "Because, you see, there wasn't really a ban on children. There was a ban on one child, my son, who apparently isn't good enough for this family's Christmas celebration." The room erupted in murmuring. I witnessed surprised expressions, disapproving looks directed at my parents, and perplexed youngsters observing the adult drama unfold. But that's not even the best part, I remarked with a dry laugh. While my son isn't good enough to attend Christmas, I'm apparently good enough to send my parents $1,000 every month. And Rachel here sends $500. Rachel's husband, Jack, raised his head. Wait, what? $500. Rachel's cheeks drained of color as Jack turned to face her. You're sending your parents money every month? From where? Our account barely covers the bills as it is. Rachel's composure snapped. Her cheeks flushed scarlet as she stared at our parents and her husband. I never actually sent any money, she blurted out. The room was stunned into silence. Mom and Dad asked me to say I was sending $500 so Dakota would agree to help them financially. They said if she thought I was contributing too, she'd feel obligated. The hush that ensued was deafening. I watched as my relatives' features softened with understanding as they realized what had happened, how my parents and sister had duped me into financially supporting them while excluding my child from family gatherings. Aunt Caroline's words rang out sharply and clearly. You scammed your own daughter out of thousands of dollars. You're nothing but scammers, using your own daughter like an ATM while treating her kid like dirt. That's low, even for you two. The gathering erupted in overlapping voices, with some expressing disdain and others demanding explanations. Rachel was attempting to explain herself to an increasingly enraged Jack as my parents stood there, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. I raised my hand, drowning out the continued disputes around me. I have something else to say. The room became quiet again, and all eyes returned to me. Mom and Dad remained motionless before the Christmas tree, their faces ashen. Rachel was still explaining herself to Jack, but even they paused to listen. From this moment on, my voice was clear and firm. I will no longer be sending you any money, and I won't be maintaining any relationship with you or Rachel. I'm done. Without waiting for an answer, I turned and went out, leaving the bag of gifts at the door. The sound of the door closing behind me felt final, like the end of a chapter one should have concluded years ago. Sitting in my car, I took out my phone and accessed the banking app. With a few fast touches, I canceled the monthly transfer to my mother's account. It felt like severing a cord that had been dragging behind me for months. The journey to Sarah and Jim's house seemed to take both forever and no time at all. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed Tommy through the window, helping Sarah decorate Christmas cookies. The sight of him, happy and loved, brought tears to my eyes. We spent the rest of Christmas with Sarah and Jim, baking cookies, singing songs, and watching Tommy's eyes light up as he assisted Jim build the nativity scene. This, I understood, is how family should feel. My phone rang the next morning while Tommy was still sleeping among the goodies Santa had brought him. It was Aunt Caroline. You might want to hear how things ended last night, she said without preamble. After you left, it was like a dam broke. Uncle Mike stood up and said he couldn't stay in that house another minute. Then Aunt Marie and Uncle Steve followed. Pretty soon, everyone was gathering their coats and kids. I listened as she told how the relatives had all departed together, without even saying goodbye to my parents. As they walked out, some appeared to make loud comments about deceptive behavior and family shame. And Jack? I inquired quietly. Oh, honey, he was livid. Packed up the kids right then and there. Told Rachel he needed time to think about their marriage. Said he was taking the children to his parents' house for Christmas. Rachel was crying. Your parents were trying to do damage control, but it was too late. I overheard her take a deep breath. I want you to know, Dakota, we're all on your side. What they did to you and Tommy, it's unforgivable. After I hung up, I sat on my bed, absorbing everything. My phone began to buzz with notifications. Text messages from Mom, Dad, and Rachel. They all said variations on the same thing. We're sorry. We were wrong. Please talk to us. We can explain. I read every message once, then I archived them without replying. The week between Christmas and New Year's was a calm haze. Tommy and I spent quiet evenings with Sarah and Jim, playing board games, watching Christmas movies, and relishing the simple pleasures of being with people who genuinely loved us. On New Year's Eve morning, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I noticed Mom and Dad standing on my porch, clutching a large, carefully wrapped box. My heart pounded against my ribs as I considered whether to open the door. Dakota, we know you're home, Mom said, her voice muffled by the door. Please, we just want to talk. After a brief hesitation, I opened the door, but remained firmly in the entryway, preventing their access. They appeared smaller, less threatening than they did a week before. "We brought this for Tommy," Dad explained, holding out the box. Through the wrapping paper, I noticed the logo of a high-end electronics retailer. "He doesn't need it," I said, making no attempt to accept the present. "Please, Dakota," Mom came forward. "We know we were wrong. The way we treated Tommy, the manipulation with the money. We're truly sorry. And we want you to know," Dad said hurriedly, "that this isn't about the money you were sending us. We really do feel terrible about everything." I examined their faces, looking for authenticity. "Are you sorry because you realize what you did was wrong? Or are you sorry because the entire family knows what you did and won't speak to you anymore?" They exchanged glances. In that quick glance, I had my answer. "I think you should leave," I answered gently. "I don't believe you, and I don't trust you. Not anymore." "But we're family," Mom insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "No," I shook my head. "Families don't manipulate each other. Family doesn't exclude a child from Christmas. Family doesn't scheme and lie to get money. What you did, that's not family." They ultimately left, still carrying the undesired present, leaving their apologies hanging in the air. As they walked to their car, I watched them drive away, not sorrowful, but relieved. In the months that followed, I stood by my decision. I did not answer their calls or texts. Rachel also tried to contact me, but I disabled her phone number. The money I had been paying to my parents was transferred to Tommy's education fund. The strange thing about removing toxic individuals from your life is how much space it creates for better relationships to develop. Aunt Caroline began inviting us over for Sunday dinners. Uncle Mike and his wife invited us over for barbecues where Tommy could play with his cousins. Everyone made an effort to include him, asking him about his interests and encouraging him to ask questions. "Mom, why does Uncle Mike's pool have that funny smell?" Tommy inquired one summer afternoon. "That's the chlorine, buddy," Uncle Mike said before I could respond, embarking on an explanation of water treatment and chemical processes that captivated Tommy. I witnessed my son blossom under the care and devotion of family members who genuinely wanted to know him, not change him. He began calling Sarah and Jim Grandma and Grandpa solely, and they continued to be our bedrock, our safe haven in any storm.